The warriors of the Eagle and Jaguar, elite forces of empire, the making of a warrior. In the cold pre-dawn darkness of the Calmecac temple school, 15-year-old Itzel rose from his reed mat as the conch shell trumpet announced another day of training that would either forge him into one of the empire's elite warriors or break him beneath the weight of expectations that had shaped his every moment since childhood. The son of a noble family, whose lineage traced back to the founders of Tenochtitlan, Itzel carried within his blood both the privilege and the crushing responsibility of becoming a protector of cosmic order through mastery of warfare's most demanding arts. The obsidian blade that lay beside his sleeping place caught the faint starlight filtering through the stone windows, its razor edge sharp enough to split a hair, yet spiritually consecrated to serve divine purposes through the warrior's dedication to capturing enemies rather than merely killing them. This weapon, crafted by master artisans, whose techniques had been perfected across generations of temple service, represented far more than a tool of violence. It embodied the sacred technology through which mortal warriors participated in the eternal struggle between order and chaos that maintained universal harmony. The cotton armor that Itzel donned each morning had been blessed through elaborate ceremonies that connected its protective power to cosmic forces, while embedding within its fibers the accumulated spiritual strength of warrior ancestors whose courage had built and defended the greatest empire in the Americas. The garment's multiple layers could stop obsidian blades and wooden clubs, while providing the mobility necessary for the complex combat techniques that distinguished Aztec warfare from the brutal simplicity of mere slaughter. The feathered shield that completed his battle equipment bore the eagle insignia that identified him as an aspirant to the courtly order, the elite warrior society, whose members had proven their worth through capturing multiple enemies in single combat, while demonstrating the spiritual discipline necessary for serving as earthly representatives of Huitli's divine will. The shield's construction combined practical defensive capabilities with artistic magnificence that proclaimed the bearer's social status and spiritual authority to all who witnessed his presence on the battlefield. The training regimen that occupied Itzel's days began before sunrise, with purification rituals that included bloodletting ceremonies designed to heighten spiritual awareness, while demonstrating personal commitment to divine service. The obsidian thorns that pierced his earlobes, tongue, and genitals created sacred wounds whose pain transformed ordinary consciousness into heightened states of awareness that enabled direct communion with patron deities who provided guidance and protection during combat situations. The physical conditioning that followed these spiritual preparations included running across difficult terrain while carrying heavy equipment, swimming in the cold waters of Lake Texcoco during all-season, engaging in wrestling matches that developed the grappling skills essential for capturing enemies alive rather than killing them outright. The emphasis on subduing rather than slaying opponents required levels of physical fitness, tactical sophistication, and psychological control that exceeded the demands placed upon ordinary soldiers whose primary objective was simply to survive battlefield encounters. The weapons training that formed the core of elite warrior education involved mastery of multiple combat systems that could be adapted to different tactical situations and enemy capability. The Macuahuitl, a wooden club embedded with obsidian blades that could decapitate a horse with a single blow, according to Spanish accounts, required years of practice to wield effectively, while maintaining the precision necessary to disable rather than kill human opponent. The Atlalal spear thrower demanded coordination and strength that enabled warriors to penetrate enemy armor from distances that provided tactical advantages, while creating opportunities for closing to melee range where capture techniques could be the psychological preparation that accompanied physical training included meditation practices, dietary restrictions, and sexual abstinence that maintained the spiritual purity necessary for receiving divine guidance, while developing the mental discipline required for making life or death decisions under extreme stress. The young warriors who completed this preparation possessed not merely combat skills, but spiritual authority that enabled them to serve as intermediaries between human communities and divine forces, whose favor determined the outcomes of individual battles and imperial campaigns. The academic studies that complemented martial training included instruction in astronomy, mathematics, and religious doctrine that enabled warriors to understand their role within cosmic processes, while developing the intellectual capabilities necessary for leadership positions within imperial administration. The elite warriors who mastered both combat arts and scholarly disciplines could advance to governmental roles that combined military expertise with administrative responsibility for managing the complex systems that sustained imperial prosperity. The graduation ceremonies that marked the transition from student to active warrior involved elaborate ritual combats against experienced fighters who tested the candidate's technical proficiency, spiritual preparation, and psychological readiness for the sacred responsibility of capturing enemies for sacrificial purposes. The young men who passed these trials received recognition as junior members of warrior societies, while beginning their quest for the battlefield, achievements that would determine the eventual rank within the military hierarchy that governed social status and political influence throughout the empire. The brotherhood bonds that developed among warriors who shared the dangers and privileges of elite military service created networks of mutual support and collective identity, transcended individual family loyalties, while establishing alternative kinship structures based on shared commitment to martial excellence and divine service. These relationships provided emotional sustenance during difficult campaigns, while creating political alliances that could influence imperial policy and succession decisions when military leaders achieved positions of governmental authority. The spiritual dimension of warrior identity extended far beyond mere religious observance to encompass direct participation in cosmic processes through ritual activities that maintained universal order while ensuring continued divine favor for imperial enterprises. The warriors who achieved elite status served not merely as soldiers but as priests, whose battlefield achievements qualified them to conduct sacrificial ceremonies and other religious activities that connected human communities to supernatural forces, whose cooperation was essential for imperial survival and prosperity. The Orders of Excellence, the Koala warriors, whose eagle regalia symbolized their spiritual connection to the solar deity's daily triumph over darkness, represented the pinnacle of aggressive martial excellence within the Aztec military system, embodying qualities of vision, speed, and divine authority that made them equally effective as shock troops and ceremonial guardians of imperial dignity during state occasions that required demonstrations of imperial power and religious sanction. The elaborate feathered costumes that distinguished eagle warriors from order soldiers required hundreds of hours of craftsmanship by master artisans who possessed both technical expertise and spiritual knowledge necessary for creating garments that served as functional armor while manifesting divine presence through artistic magnificence. The brilliant plumage of tropical birds formed complex patterns that caught and reflected sunlight in ways that seemed to pulse with supernatural life, creating visual effects that intimidated enemies while inspiring allied forces through displays of cosmic favor and imperial wealth. The training requirements for admission to the Koala Order included demonstrated success in capturing multiple enemies during actual combat operations, proficiency in aerial tactics that involved leaping from elevated positions to attack opponents from unexpected angles, and mastery of psychological warfare techniques that utilized sound, movement, and visual display to demoralize hostile forces before physical combat began. The candidates who met these standards underwent initiation ceremonies that included ritual death and rebirth experiences designed to transform individual identity
while establishing permanent spiritual bonds with Eagle consciousness and solar energy. The tactical specializations that characterized Eagle warrior operations emphasized rapid strikes against enemy leadership and communication systems, while creating maximum psychological impact through coordinated displays of supernatural authority and imperial power. These elite units could appear suddenly from concealed positions, eliminate key targets through swift and precise attacks, and disappear before enemy forces could organize effective counterattack, leaving behind confusion and fear that could paralyze larger formations while creating opportunities for conventional troops to exploit tactical advantages. The Osolala warriors, whose Jaguar regalia connected them to the underworld powers that governed night, stealth, and transformation, specialized in covert operations that required different skills and psychological qualities than those emphasized in Eagle warrior training, creating complementary capabilities that enabled Aztec commanders to respond effectively to diverse tactical situations and enemy strategies, while maintaining spiritual balance between solar and terrestrial force. The spotted pelts and carved masks that identified Jaguar warriors had been blessed through elaborate ceremonies that invoked the assistance of Tezcatlipoca and other deities, whose dominion included warfare, deception, and the revelation of hidden truths through conflict and testing. The transformation that occurred when warriors donned these sacred garments enabled them to channel supernatural powers while accessing predatory instincts and enhanced sensory capabilities that provided crucial advantages during night operations and stealth missions. The training regimen for Jaguar warriors emphasized endurance, patience, and the ability to move silently through difficult terrain while maintaining combat readiness, despite extended periods of concealment and observation. The initiates who sought admission to the Osolala Order underwent trials that included survival exercises in wilderness areas, stealth operations against experienced opponents who actively hunted them, and psychological tests that evaluated their capacity for maintaining discipline and mental clarity during prolonged isolation and stress.
The ceremonial functions that both warrior orders performed during religious festivals and state occasions demonstrated their role as living representations of divine power, while providing opportunities for public recognition of individual achievements and collective dedication to imperial service. The elaborate dance performances, ritual combats, and processional displays that featured Eagle and Jaguar warriors served as both entertainment and religious instruction, while reinforcing social hierarchies and cultural values that supported imperial stability and expansion. The recruitment standards that governed admission to elite warrior societies created merit-based advancement opportunities that could transcend birth status while maintaining essential connections between military excellence and social privilege. The commoners who achieved Eagle or Jaguar rank through exceptional battlefield performance gained access to noble privileges, including land grants, tax exemptions, and participation in governmental councils that influenced imperial policy and resource allocation. The equipment maintenance, ceremonial preparation that occupied warriors during peacetime included not only care of weapons and armor, but also participation in artistic and religious activities that developed cultural knowledge and spiritual understanding necessary for leadership roles within imperial society. The warriors who mastered both martial and intellectual disciplines could advance to positions that combined military command with religious authority and governmental responsibility. The international reputation that Aztec elite warriors had achieved throughout Mesoamerica influenced diplomatic relations and military planning by enemy forces who understood that confronting Eagle and Jaguar warriors required exceptional preparation and coordination. The psychological impact of these elite units extended far beyond their actual numbers to affect strategic calculations and political decisions by rulers who sought to avoid conflicts that might result in devastating defeats and loss of prestige. The technological innovations that enhanced elite warrior effectiveness included specialized weapons, improved armor designs, and tactical equipment that provided decisive advantages during crucial phases of battle operation. The continuous refinement of these military technologies reflected both practical experience gained through combat operations and spiritual insights received through communication with patron deities who revealed improved methods for maintaining imperial dominance. The legacy traditions that preserved elite warrior knowledge across generations included oral histories, artistic representation, and ritual practices that transmitted tactical wisdom while maintaining spiritual connections to warrior ancestors whose achievements had established precedents for contemporary excellence. The cultural continuity that these traditions provided enabled each new generation of warriors to build upon accumulated knowledge while adapting ancient wisdom to contemporary challenges and opportunities. The art of capture, the fundamental philosophy that distinguished Aztec warfare from the killing-focused military systems of most other civilizations, emphasized the spiritual and practical value of capturing enemies alive, rather than simply eliminating them through lethal violence, creating tactical challenges and technical requirements that demanded far greater skill, coordination, and psychological sophistication than conventional combat methods, while serving cosmic purposes that connected earthly conflicts to divine processes requiring human participation. The theological framework that justified and demanded capture-focused warfare derived from Aztec understanding of cosmic reciprocity between human and divine realms, wherein the gods had sacrificed themselves to create and sustain the world, while requiring regular offerings of life force to maintain universal order and prevent cosmic collapse into primordial chaos. The warriors who captured enemies for sacrificial purposes served not merely military objectives, but cosmic necessities that transcended individual or even imperial interests to encompass the fundamental maintenance of existence itself. The technical challenges involved in subduing armed opponents without killing them required development of specialized weapons, tactics, and training methods that differed dramatically from conventional military approaches designed for maximum lethality. The clubs, nets, lasso, and grappling techniques employed by Aztec warriors had to be effective enough to overcome enemy resistance, while precise enough to avoid fatal injuries that would eliminate the spiritual value of eventual sacrifice, while denying the gods the conscious offerings they required. The team coordination that successful capture operations demanded created unit cohesion and tactical sophistication that exceeded the requirements of ordinary warfare, while developing leadership capabilities and interpersonal skills that qualified warriors for administrative positions within imperial bureaucracies. The ability to coordinate complex maneuvers involving multiple participants working toward common objectives provided excellent preparation for governmental roles that required similar organizational abilities and collaborative decision-making. The psychological preparation necessary for engaging in capture-focused combat included overcoming natural survival instincts that favored killing enemies immediately, rather than risking personal injury through prolonged struggles to subdue opponents, while maintaining spiritual awareness of cosmic purposes that gave meaning to individual sacrifices and battlefield dangers. The warriors who mastered this psychological discipline possessed mental toughness and spiritual authority that qualified them for religious leadership, as well as military command. The tactical innovations that Aztec commanders developed to maximize capture opportunities included battlefield formations that surrounded and isolated individual enemies, communication systems that enabled coordinated attacks by multiple warriors against single target, and timing strategies that created psychological pressure while providing physical advantages through superior positioning and numerical superiority at crucial moments. The equipment specifications that supported capture operations included specialized restraints for securing prisoner, medical supplies for treating wounded captives who needed to survive transportation to ceremonial center, and logistical arrangements for feeding and housing captured enemies during extended campaigns that might last weeks or months before returning to bases where sacrificial ceremonies could be conducted according to appropriate religious protocol. The training exercises that prepared warriors for capture operations included mock battles against volunteers who simulated enemy resistance while avoiding actual injuries,
grappling competitions that developed necessary physical skill, and psychological conditioning that enabled participants to maintain focus and determination despite the stress and confusion that characterized real combat situations, where mistakes could result in death or capture by hostile forces. The ranking systems that recognized capture created competitive incentives that motivated warriors to excel in this demanding form of combat, while providing clear criteria for advancement through military hierarchies based on demonstrated skill rather than merely political connections or family status. The warriors who captured multiple enemies gained recognition, material rewards, and social privileges that encouraged continued excellence, while inspiring younger fighters to pursue similar achievement. The enemy perspectives on Aztec capture-focused tactics revealed both fear and contempt for military methods that seemed to prioritize religious objectives over practical battlefield effectiveness, creating psychological advantages for Aztec forces while generating strategic vulnerabilities that could be exploited by opponents who understood the limitations imposed by capture requirements and developed countermeasures. The seasonal variations in capture operations reflected both ceremonial calendars that determined optimal timing for sacrificial activities and practical considerations involving weather, agricultural cycles, and logistical capabilities that affected military planning and resource allocation throughout the imperial territory. The coordination between religious requirements and military capabilities required sophisticated planning that integrated spiritual and material factors in comprehensive strategic frameworks. The diplomatic implications of capture-focused warfare included both intimidation effects that encouraged peaceful submission by potential enemies who feared being taken for sacrifice, and negotiation opportunities that could resolve conflicts through tribute arrangements, rather than prolonged military campaigns that drained imperial resources, while disrupting economic activities and cultural development throughout affected regions. Weapons of sacred war. The Macuahuitl that served as the primary weapon of Aztec elite warriors represented a masterpiece of indigenous military technology that combined devastating effectiveness with sophisticated craftsmanship, creating implements of warfare that could decapitate horses or split human skulls, while maintaining the precision necessary for capture operations that required disabling rather than killing enemy combatants, in service of cosmic purposes that demanded conscious sacrificial offering. The obsidian blades that provided the weapon's cutting edge were sharper than modern surgical instruments, while possessing spiritual significance that connected their use to volcanic forces and divine powers associated with transformation, sacrifice, and the cyclic destruction and renewal that governed cosmic processes. The crafting of these blades required specialized knowledge and ritual preparation that transformed ordinary stoneworking into sacred technology, capable of channeling supernatural energy through material instruments of divine will.
The wooden core that supported the obsidian inserts was constructed from carefully selected hardwoods that had been seasoned through processes that enhanced both physical durability and spiritual potency, while creating weapons that could withstand the stresses of combat, while serving as focal points for divine energy that enhanced warrior effectiveness through supernatural assistance and protection. The selection, preparation, and assembly of these components required years of training and spiritual development that qualified craftsmen to create implements worthy of elite warrior use. The Atlat spear thrower that extended the range and power of Aztec projectile weapons enabled warriors to engage enemies from distances that provided tactical advantages, while creating opportunities for coordinated attacks that could overwhelm defensive positions through sustained bombardment, followed by swift assault operations designed to capture rather than kill opposing forces. The mechanical principles that governed Atlat effectiveness required understanding of physics and engineering that reflected sophisticated indigenous scientific knowledge. The specialized ammunition designed for Atlat use included both lethal points for eliminating dangerous enemies who could not be captured safely, and blunt projectiles intended to stun or disable opponents, who could then be subdued through conventional capture techniques. The tactical flexibility that this variety of ammunition provided enabled warriors to adapt their weapons to specific combat situations, while maintaining effectiveness across diverse operational requirements and enemy capabilities. The defensive equipment that protected Aztec warriors during combat operations included shields constructed from wood and leather that could deflect obsidian blades and projectile weapons, while displaying artistic designs that identified unit affiliations and individual achievements. The Macuahuitl cotton armor that covered warriors' torsos provided protection equivalent to steel mail, while maintaining flexibility necessary for the complex movements required during capture operations that demanded agility as well as protection. The psychological weapons that enhanced Aztec military effectiveness included drums, horns, and other noise-making devices that created overwhelming auditory bombardment designed to terrify enemies while coordinating friendly unit movements through coded signals that enabled complex tactical maneuver. The visual impact of elaborate warrior costumes, face paint, and ceremonial displays added to the psychological pressure while demonstrating divine favor and imperial authority to opponents who might choose submission rather than face destruction. The maintenance requirements that kept Aztec weapons in combat-ready condition included not only technical procedures for sharpening blades and repairing damage, but also spiritual activities that preserved the supernatural properties necessary for maximum effectiveness. The blessing ceremonies, offering rituals, and purification activities that preceded major campaigns ensured that weapons would function as intended while providing divine protection for their users during dangerous operations. The tactical doctrine that governed weapon employment emphasized coordination between different types of equipment and specialists who maximized collective effectiveness through integrated approaches that combined projectile attacks, shock assaults, and capture operations in seamless sequences that overwhelmed enemy resistance while achieving strategic objectives with minimum friendly casualties and maximum prisoner acquisition for sacrificial purposes. The technological limitations that constrained Aztec weapon development included the absence of metalworking capabilities that might have provided alternative materials for cutting edges and structural components, creating dependencies upon obsidian and organic materials that required different manufacturing techniques and maintenance procedures than metal weapons, while possessing unique advantages, including superior sharpness and spiritual significance that metal implements could not match. The innovation processes that improved Aztec weapon design included both practical experimentation that tested new configurations and materials, and spiritual revelation that provided divine guidance of optimal forms and function. The integration of empirical testing with religious inspiration created development methods that produced weapons superior to purely rational or purely spiritual approaches, while maintaining harmony between material effectiveness and cosmic purpose. The international influence that Aztec weapon technology had throughout Mesoamerica included both direct copying by allied and enemy forces who recognized superior performance and indirect effects on military doctrine and tactical development that encourage adoption of capture-focused warfare methods by societies that lacked the religious motivations that originally inspired these approaches, but appreciated their practical advantages for political and economic objectives. The warrior's path, the initiation ceremonies that marked the beginning of elite warrior careers, involved ritual challenges that tested not only combat skills, physical endurance, but also spiritual readiness for accepting cosmic responsibilities that extended far beyond personal survival or individual advancement to encompass service to divine purposes and imperial necessities that demanded complete dedication, regardless of personal cost or individual preferences. The first battlefield experience that qualified young warriors for advancement's consideration typically occurred during carefully planned operations
where experienced veterans could provide guidance and protection, while enabling novices to demonstrate their capabilities under actual combat conditions. The capture of even a single enemy during these initial engagements provided both practical validation of training effectiveness and spiritual confirmation of divine favor that qualified warriors for more demanding assignments and greater responsibilities. The advanced criteria that governed promotion through warrior society hierarchies emphasized demonstrated competence in capture operations, while requiring evidence of spiritual development and leadership potential that would enable senior warriors to serve effectively in command positions that involve responsibility for other fighters' lives and success. The evaluation processes that determined eligibility for advancements included both objective assessment of battlefield achievements and subjective evaluation of character qualities that indicated readiness for greater responsibility. The mentorship relationships that connected experienced warriors with promising novices provide essential guidance for technical skill development, while transmitting cultural knowledge and spiritual wisdom that could not be learned through formal instruction alone. The informal networks that developed through these relationships created support systems that sustained warriors through difficult periods, while establishing personal bonds that strengthened unit cohesion and collective effectiveness during dangerous operations. The specialized training that prepared elite warriors for leadership roles included instruction in tactics, logistics, and administration that qualified them for command positions within military units and governmental bureaucracy. The educational programs that developed these capabilities emphasized practical problem-solving skills while maintaining spiritual perspectives that connected technical competence to cosmic purposes and divine service requirements that distinguish true leadership from mere technical proficiency. The ceremonial responsibilities that accompanied warrior advancement included participation in religious festivals, sacrificial ceremonies, and state occasions that demonstrated elite status, while providing opportunities for public recognition and cultural education. The performance requirements for these activities demanded not only physical presence, but also understanding of complex symbolic systems and ritual procedures that connected individual achievement to collective identity and imperial ideology. The economic privileges that rewarded warrior excellence included land grants, tribute exemptions, and commercial opportunities that provided material security, while enabling continued focus on military and spiritual development without distraction from survival necessities that might compromise performance or dedication. The wealth accumulation that these privileges enabled created resources for supporting family members and retainers, while establishing social networks that enhanced political influence and cultural impact. The marriage arrangements that connected elite warriors to noble families created dynastic alliances that strengthened imperial administration, while ensuring that martial excellence would be transmitted to future generations through both genetic inheritance and cultural transmission of warrior values and spiritual tradition. The political implications of these marriage connections extended throughout imperial society to influence policy decisions and resource allocation at the highest levels of governmental authority. The retirement transitions that eventually affected even the most successful warriors included arrangements for continued service in advisory capacities, religious roles, or administrative positions that utilized accumulated experience, while accommodating reduced physical capabilities that inevitably accompanied age. The cultural respect accorded to veteran warriors ensured that their knowledge would not be lost, while providing meaningful roles that maintained dignity and social status despite reduced active duty capability. The death preparations that occupied warrior consciousness throughout their careers included spiritual practices that ensured appropriate afterlife destinations, while arranging for posthumous honor that would preserve their memory and inspire future generations of fight. The funeral ceremonies for fallen warriors demonstrated collective gratitude, while reinforcing cultural values that encouraged continued excellence and sacrifice in service of cosmic purposes that transcended individual mortality. The legacy traditions that preserved warrior achievements for historical memory included artistic representations oral narrative and ceremonial reenactments that maintained cultural knowledge while providing inspiration and guidance for contemporary fighters who sought to equal or exceed the accomplishments of honored predecessors. The educational value of these traditions extended throughout society to influence civilian understanding of warrior culture and imperial ideology. The international reputation that Aztec elite warriors achieved throughout Mesoamerica influenced diplomatic relations and military planning. Foreign powers who recognized the exceptional quality of these forces while developing countermeasures and alternative strategies designed to avoid direct confrontation with units whose effectiveness had been demonstrated through numerous successful campaigns and battlefield victories, established Aztec military supremacy throughout the region.
A test of fire. The flowering wars that provided controlled environments for warrior testing and enemy capture represented sophisticated military innovations that balanced religious requirements with practical training needs, while creating strategic advantages that served imperial expansion objectives through methods that minimized costs while maximizing benefits for all participating forces and their supporting political structures. The ritual frameworks that governed flowering war conduct included detailed protocols for combat initiation, duration limitations, and termination procedures that ensured these conflicts would serve their intended purposes without escalating into total warfare that could devastate participating communities while failing to provide the controlled testing conditions necessary for warrior development and enemy acquisition for sacrificial purposes. The geographic locations selected for flowering wars typically involved neutral territories or designated battlefields that provided appropriate terrain for the complex maneuvers required during capture-focused combat, while enabling withdrawal and regrouping activities that would be impossible during conventional siege warfare, or territorial conquest campaigns that demanded complete victory rather than controlled engagement for specific objectives. The participant selection processes that determined which warriors would engage in flowering war operations emphasized both skill level and spiritual readiness, while ensuring that these conflicts would provide appropriate challenges for fighters at different stages of development. The matching systems that paired opponents of comparable abilities created fair contests, while maximizing learning opportunities for all participants regardless of their eventual success or failure in individual combat encounters. The diplomatic preparations that preceded flowering war campaigns included negotiations between participating powers that established rules of engagement, prisoner exchange procedure, and post-conflict relationships that would govern ongoing interactions between communities whose warriors had tested themselves against each other in controlled combat situations, designed to enhance mutual respect while maintaining competitive excellence. The training applications that utilized flowering war experiences included tactical analysis, individual skill assessment, and unit cohesion evaluation that provided essential feedback for military development programs, while identifying areas requiring additional instruction or different approaches. The systematic collection and analysis of combat data enabled continuous improvement of training methods, while ensuring that warrior education would remain current with battlefield realities and enemy capability. The religious dimensions of flowering war conduct included sacrificial offerings that honored patron deities, while seeking divine blessing for combat operations that served cosmic purposes through provision of captives, whose eventual sacrifice would maintain universal order. The ceremonial activities that preceded and followed these conflicts reinforced spiritual understanding while providing opportunities for thanksgiving and purification that connected military service to religious obligation. The economic implications of flowering wars included costs for equipment, transportation, and personnel, while generating benefits through tribute collection, trade opportunity, and political relationships that enhanced imperial prosperity, without requiring the massive expenditures associated with total conquest campaigns that might destroy valuable resources
while creating administrative burdens that exceeded potential benefit. The psychological effects of flowering war participation included confidence building for successful warriors, motivation enhancement for military training programs, and collective identity strengthening for communities whose fighters demonstrated competence in controlled combat situations. The reputation effects that resulted from flowering war performance influenced political relationships while affecting recruitment and retention of quality personnel for military service throughout the imperial territory. The tactical innovations that emerged from flowering war experience included new weapons techniques, formation strategy, and communication methods that enhanced overall military effectiveness, while providing solutions to combat challenges that might not emerge during conventional warfare situations. The experimental opportunities that flowering wars provided enabled testing of theoretical approaches under realistic conditions, while minimizing risks associated with implementation of unproven methods during critical operations. The intelligence gathering that accompanied flowering war operations included observation of enemy capabilities, assessment of foreign military developments, and evaluation of potential threats that might require future military response. The information acquired through these controlled conflicts provided essential strategic intelligence, while maintaining peaceful relations that enabled continued observation and assessment without triggering hostile responses. The alliance building that flowering wars facilitated include establishment of mutual respect between warrior elites from different communities, while creating personal relationships that could influence diplomatic negotiations and military cooperation during periods when shared threats required coordinated responses that transcended traditional political boundaries and cultural differences. The Eagle's Shadow, the Spanish conquest that ultimately tested Aztec warrior societies against unprecedented challenges, revealed both the strengths and limitations of military systems that had been optimized for Mesoamerican warfare conditions, demonstrating how technological advantages and different tactical doctrines could overcome traditional combat methods, regardless of individual skill levels or spiritual preparation. The initial encounters between elite Aztec warriors and Spanish forces created confusion and tactical problems that existing training and doctrine had not anticipated, as the European emphasis on killing rather than capturing enemies violated fundamental assumptions that had shaped indigenous military development for centuries, while neutralizing many of the advantages that capture-focused techniques normally provided in conventional Mesoamerican conflicts. Adaptation challenges that Aztec commanders faced when confronting Spanish tactics included the need to develop new approaches to combat against armored opponents who fought with metal weapons from horseback, while utilizing firearms that could kill from distances that exceeded traditional projectile ranges. The psychological impact of these technological disparities complicated tactical adjustments while creating morale problems that affected unit cohesion and individual performance during crucial combat operations. The heroic resistance that many elite warriors demonstrated during the conquest period provided inspiration for subsequent indigenous movements, while establishing precedents for cultural survival through military excellence and spiritual dedication that transcended immediate political outcome. The sacrifice of individual lives in service of collective identity and cosmic purpose demonstrated the enduring power of warrior culture, while providing models for resistance that would influence Mexican national identity for centuries. The tactical lessons that emerged from conquest periods included recognition that traditional Mesoamerican warfare methods required fundamental modifications to remain effective against European military technology, while maintaining cultural values and spiritual purposes that gave meaning to martial service and individual sacrifice. The integration of new weapons and techniques with traditional warrior culture created hybrid approaches that preserved essential elements while adapting to changed circumstances. The survival strategies that enabled some warrior traditions to persist through the colonial period included underground preservation of martial knowledge, adaptation to Spanish military service, and integration with religious resistance movements that maintained indigenous identity while accommodating colonial political requirements. The cultural continuity that these strategies provided created foundations for later revival of warrior traditions during independence movements, and cultural renaissance periods. The legendary status that many elite warriors achieved through their resistance to Spanish conquest created heroes and natives that inspired subsequent generations, while providing cultural resources for maintaining indigenous identity despite systematic efforts at cultural suppression and religious conversion. The artistic representations and oral traditions that preserved these heroic stories served as vehicles for cultural transmission, while providing symbols of resistance and identity that transcended political boundaries. The influence that Aztec warrior traditions had on subsequent Mexican military culture included adoption of indigenous symbols, tactical concepts, and spiritual traditions that enhanced national identity while providing continuity with pre-Hispanic heritage that distinguished Mexican martial culture from purely European military tradition. The integration of Aztec warrior imagery into national symbolism demonstrated enduring respect for indigenous military excellence while providing inspiration for contemporary service members. The archaeological evidence that preserves information about Aztec warrior societies includes weapon armor, artistic representations, and architectural features that provide physical testimony to the sophistication and effectiveness of indigenous military systems, while enabling modern understanding of tactical methods and cultural values that shaped pre-Hispanic warfare throughout Mesoamerica. The educational programs that study Aztec warrior culture in contemporary Mexico include academic research, museum exhibitions, and cultural festivals that maintain knowledge of indigenous military traditions, while providing opportunities for national reflection on the complex legacy of conquest, resistance, and cultural synthesis that characterizes Mexican historical experience and contemporary identity. The international recognition that Aztec warrior societies have achieved through historical and anthropological research demonstrates the universal significance of military culture's successfully integrated spiritual values with practical effectiveness, while providing models for understanding how armed forces can serve both political objectives and cosmic purposes through dedication to excellence and service that transcends individual interests. In the end, the warriors of the Eagle and Jaguar represent humanity's enduring quest for excellence in service of purposes that transcend individual survival, while demonstrating how military culture can embody the highest aspirations of civilization through dedication to cosmic order, collective welfare, and spiritual development that transforms mere fighting into sacred service worthy of divine favor and historical memory.